And that, class, is why the Zorgblatt Treaty of 3567 is considered the turning point in human-xeno relations, droned Professor Zlorbax, his 7 eye stalks swiveling independently as he surveyed the classroom of bored interspecies students. The professor's monotonous voice had lulled most of the alien students into a stupor, their various appendages drooping listlessly. Even the normally attentive Glorpians, with their hyper-caffeinated nervous systems, were struggling to keep their eye fronds from wilting. But there, in the back row, sat Jake Thompson, the sole human exchange student at the Galactic Academy of Xenopolitics. Unlike his alien classmates, Jake was wide awake. Not because he found the lecture particularly riveting, he didn't, but because he was desperately, painstakingly trying to hold in a fart. You see, Jake had made the rookie mistake of indulging in the cafeteria's authentic Earth cuisine that morning. The chili dogs, if you could call that abomination chili, or, for that matter, a dog had been working their gastrointestinal magic all morning. Now, as Professor Zlorbax droned on about obscure treaties, Jake's intestines were staging a rebellion of their own. Just 10 more minutes, Jake thought, gritting his teeth. 10 more minutes, and I can make a break for it. But Jake's body had other plans. With a sudden, traitorous gurgle, his stomach decided that now was the perfect time to release its pent-up pressure. Brah-rah. Arrah. The fart echoed through the lecture hall like a foghorn, cutting through Professor Zlorbax's monotone like a hot knife through butter. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, all hell broke loose. Great galaxies shrieked a Neptunian student, their watery form rippling in alarm. The human is rupturing. It's a bioweapon, screeched a paranoid Martian, his antennae quivering in terror. I knew we couldn't trust these mammals. Professor Zlorbax's eye stalks went rigid with shock. Everyone remained calm, he bellowed, though his voice cracked with panic. This is clearly well, I'm not entirely sure what this is, but I'm certain it's covered in subsection 7 billion of the emergency protocols. As the alien students scrambled for cover, overturning desks and diving under chairs, Jake sat frozen in mortification. He hadn't expected his natural bodily function to cause an intergalactic incident. Wait, Jake tried to explain, his voice barely audible over the chaos. It's just a fart. Haven't you guys ever, passed gas? His words fell on deaf ears, or whatever passed for ears among the varied alien species. The Glorpians were already erecting a hasty psychic barrier around themselves, their eye fronds glowing with defensive energy. A brave or possibly suicidal Venusian slithered up to Jake, its gelatinous body quivering with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Human, Jake, it burbled, are you expelling your soul? Is this how your species reproduces? Should we prepare an incubation chamber? Jake buried his face in his hands. No, and definitely no, he groaned. Look, it's just... But before he could finish, the classroom doors burst open. In stormed a squad of galactic security officers, their tentacles brandishing an assortment of high-tech weaponry. Stand down, Earthling barked the lead officer, a grizzled Jovian veteran with more scars than smooth skin. We've detected an unauthorized release of noxious gases in this sector. Surrender peacefully, or we'll be forced to neutralize you. Jake raised his hands slowly, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. Officers, I swear this is all a big misunderstanding. If you'll just let me explain. Silence, roared the Jovian. Any further emissions will be considered an act of aggression. As Jake racked his brain for a way out of this predicament, he couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, about to be arrested or worse, neutralized, all because of a bit of intestinal turbulence. If only he'd paid more attention in his intergalactic diplomacy 101 class back on Earth. Surely there must have been a chapter on cross-species bodily functions. Meanwhile, Professor Zlorbax had managed to regain some semblance of composure. Clearing his throat, or what passed for a throat in his species, he addressed the security team. Now, let's not be hasty, he said, his voice quavering slightly. I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for this emission. After all, we are an institution of higher learning. Perhaps this is an opportunity for some, hands-on xenobiology. The lead Jovian officer squinted suspiciously at Jake. Xenobiology, you say? And you're certain this isn't some sort of new human superweapon? Jake seized the opportunity. Absolutely not, he exclaimed, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. It's just a natural bodily function. Totally harmless. Well, mostly harmless. Okay, it might clear a room, but it's not going to destroy the galaxy or anything. The alien students, who had been cowering in various states of panic, began to cautiously emerge from their hiding spots. A murmur of curiosity replaced the earlier shrieks of terror. A fascinating buzzed an insectoid Betelgeusian, its compound eyes gleaming with scientific interest. And this fart, as you call it serves a biological purpose. Jake felt a bead of sweat trickle down his forehead. He'd never imagined he'd be giving an impromptu lecture on human digestion to a room full of aliens. Well, you see, it's kind of a way for our bodies to release excess gas from our digestive system. Gas chirped a avian proximon, ruffling its iridescent feathers. Like a star. Are you saying humans have miniature suns in their abdomens? Not. Exactly, Jake said, desperately wishing he'd paid more attention in biology class. It's more like, okay, you know how when you eat food, your body breaks it down. A chorus of confused murmurs rippled through the classroom. Apparently, the concept of eating wasn't as universal as Jake had assumed. Right, cultural differences, Jake muttered. He took a deep breath and tried again. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Humans, like many species on Earth, require organic matter for energy. We call this food. We ingest this food through an opening in our faces called a mouth. The alien students leaned in, utterly captivated. Even the security officers had lowered their weapons, caught up in the impromptu xenobiology lesson. This food travels through a series of organs called the digestive system, Jake continued, warming to his subject. Along the way, it's broken down into nutrients our bodies can use. But sometimes, this process produces gases as a byproduct. And well, those gases need to go somewhere. So you expel them through violent eruptions, asked a horrified Saturnian, its rings quivering with distress. Jake couldn't help but chuckle. Not violent, just noisy sometimes, and occasionally smelly, but completely natural and harmless. Professor Zlorbax, who had been furiously taking notes, suddenly perked up. Aha, he exclaimed. I knew I'd read something about this. It's mentioned in an obscure footnote of the Human Integration Protocol. Cautioned humans may occasionally emit sudden gaseous expulsions. While alarming, these are not typically signs of distress or aggression. The lead security officer scratched his scaly head with a tentacle. Well, I'll be a Neptunian's uncle, he grumbled. All this fuss over a bit of gas. Stand down, team. Looks like we won't be needing the neuron disruptors today. As the security team filed out, looking slightly disappointed at the lack of action, the alien students began to crowd around Jake, peppering him with questions. Does it hurt? Can you do it on command? Is it flammable? Do all humans possess this ability? Or are you a specially trained gas emitter? Jake held up his hands, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Whoa, one at a time. Look, it's really not that big a deal. Every human does it. We usually try to be polite about it, but sometimes, well, accidents happen. A thoughtful look crossed Professor Zlorbax's face, or at least, Jake assumed it was thoughtful. It was hard to read expressions on a face consisting mainly of writhing tentacles. You know, the professor mused, this could be an excellent opportunity for a cultural exchange. Jake, would you be willing to give a presentation on human digestive processes to the xenobiology department? Jake felt his face flush. I'm not sure I'm the most qualified person for that, Professor. Maybe we could find an actual human biologist. But the professor was already warming to the idea. Nonsense. You've already demonstrated a natural talent for explaining complex human concepts to a xeno audience. Besides, think of the academic prestige. The gaseous mysteries of humanity. An insider's perspective, it could be a groundbreaking paper. As the alien students chattered excitedly around him, Jake couldn't help but laugh. He'd come to the Galactic Academy hoping to learn about alien cultures and foster interspecies understanding. He never imagined he'd be doing it by explaining the finer points of flatulence. All right, he conceded with a grin. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. First things first, we're going to need to talk about human cuisine. Trust me, if you want to understand human gas, you need to understand human food. And so began Jake Thompson's unexpected journey into gastrointestinal diplomacy. Over the next few weeks, the Galactic Academy was abuzz with talk of the peculiar human and his fascinating bodily functions. Jake's presentation to the xenobiology department was a smash hit. He'd prepared extensively, armed with diagrams of the human digestive system, samples of notoriously gassy Earth foods. The cafeteria's attempts at recreating beans and cabbage were interesting, to say the least, and even a few carefully selected YouTube videos demonstrating the wide range of human gaseous emissions. The alien students were enthralled. They marveled at the complexity of human digestion, giggled at the various sounds humans could produce, and recoiled in horror at the concept of pull my finger. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were incidents, like the time a well-meaning Jovian student, eager to experience human culture firsthand, attempted to recreate chili in the academy's lab. The resulting concoction was less food and more biohazard, leading to the evacuation of 3 dormitory blocks and a stern memo from the administration about unauthorized zine experiments. Or the memorable day when a group of Martian exchange students, inspired by Jake's tales of human pranks, decided to surprise their professors with whoopee cushions. Unfortunately, they'd misunderstood the concept slightly and filled the cushions with actual human replicant gas. The resulting chaos shut down classes for a week while the environmental systems were purged. But despite the occasional hiccup or belch, as the case may be, Jake found himself becoming something of a campus celebrity. Aliens from all corners of the galaxy sought him out, eager to learn more about the mysterious ways of humans. Is it true that humans use their gaseous emissions as a form of communication? A curious Andromedan asked him one day in the cafeteria. Jake nearly choked on his synthetic space spaghetti. What? No, well, not officially anyway, though I guess you could argue that in some human cultures, it can be a form of humor or social bonding. The Andromedan's bioluminescent spots pulsed with excitement. Fascinating. A gaseous language of camaraderie. Tell me, how does one distinguish between a friendly emission and a hostile one? Jake buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Trust me, if it's hostile, you'll know. As the weeks turned into months, Jake found himself settling into his role as the Galactic Academy's unofficial human ambassador. He fielded questions on everything from human mating rituals. No, we don't actually have a mating season to Earth's gravitational peculiarities. Yes, things fall down, not up or sideways. But it was always the digestive questions that seemed to fascinate his alien peers the most. Jake lost count of the number of times he had to explain that no, humans couldn't breathe through their anuses, and yes, it was generally considered impolite to compliment someone on a particularly resonant belch in formal settings. One day, as Jake was leaving his comparative xenopolitics class, he was approached by a nervous-looking Vulnarian. The jellyfish-like alien pulsed with anxious bioluminescence as it addressed him. "Excuse me, human Jake," it burbled, tendrils twisting in what Jake had come to recognize as the Vulnarian equivalent of wringing one's hands. "I was wondering if I could ask you a personal question." Jake smiled encouragingly. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The Vulnarian's translucent body flushed a deep purple. "Well, you see, I've been studying human culture extensively, and I've become quite fascinated by your species' customs. Particularly your method of showing affection through the sharing of gaseous emissions." Jake blinked, momentarily stunned. "I'm sorry, what?" "You know," the Vulnarian continued, its voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "the ritual you call pulling my appendage. I was wondering if you might honor me by performing this ritual. I understand it's quite intimate, but I assure you, my intentions are purely academic." For a moment, Jake could only stare in bewildered silence. Then, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst into laughter. The Vulnarian recoiled, its tendrils curling defensively. "Oh no, have I offended you? I didn't mean to propose something inappropriate." Wiping tears of mirth from his eyes, Jake hastened to reassure the distressed alien. No, you haven't offended me at all. It's just, there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Pull my finger isn't actually a ritual of affection. It's more of a prank, I suppose." The Vulnarian's bioluminescence pulsed with confusion. "A prank? You mean, it's a form of human humor?" Jake nodded, still chuckling. "Exactly. It's not something we do to show affection. It's just a silly joke, usually played on unsuspecting friends or family members." Oh, the Vulnarian seemed to deflate slightly, its tendrils drooping. "I see. How disappointing. I had hoped to experience a true human bonding ritual." Seeing the alien's disappointment, Jake felt a twinge of sympathy. He'd been so focused on explaining the biological aspects of human digestion that he'd neglected the cultural significance, or lack thereof, of some of these practices. "Hey, don't feel bad," he said, patting the Volnarian gently on what he hoped was its shoulder equivalent. "Tell you what, how about I teach you a real human bonding ritual? One that doesn't involve any, gaseous emissions." The Volnarian perked up immediately, its body shimmering with excited colors. "Truly, you would do that for me? Oh, what an honor." Jake grinned. "Absolutely. How about we start with a classic human greeting? It's called a high five." And so, in the middle of the bustling academy hallway, Jake found himself teaching a gelatinous alien how to slap palms in celebration. It took a few tries. The Volnarian's tendrils weren't exactly built for high-fiving, but eventually, they managed a passable approximation. "Excellent," Jake cheered as their appendages made contact with a satisfying smack. "Congratulations, you've just participated in your first human high five." The Volnarian vibrated with joy, its entire body glowing a brilliant shade of orange. Oh, how exhilarating. The percussive impact, the brief moment of physical connection. Truly, humans are masters of social bonding rituals. As Jake watched the alien practice its new skill on bewildered passers-by, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. When he'd first arrived at the Galactic Academy, he'd been terrified of making some horrible cultural faux pas. Now here he was, teaching aliens how to high-five. Life, he mused, had a funny way of working out. But Jake's adventures in interstellar cultural exchange were far from over. As news of his impromptu xenobiology lectures spread, he found himself invited to speak at various academic functions across the campus. One particularly memorable event was the annual Interspecies Understanding Symposium. Jake had been asked to give a presentation on human social customs beyond the gas he'd spent weeks preparing, determined to show that there was more to humanity than their digestive quirks. As he stood at the podium, facing an auditorium packed with aliens of all shapes, sizes, and number of appendages, Jake took a deep breath. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and beings of all star systems, he began, his voice only slightly shaky. "Today, I'd like to talk to you about the rich tapestry of human social interactions. Yes, we may be known throughout the galaxy for our gaseous peculiarities, but I assure you there's so much more to us than that." For the next hour, Jake regaled his audience with tales of human customs. He explained the intricacies of handshakes, the warmth of hugs, the subtle art of small talk. He demonstrated the variety of human facial expressions, much to the amazement of species that communicated primarily through pheromones or telepathy. "And this," Jake said, contorting his face into an exaggerated grimace, "is what we call cringe. It's an expression of second-hand embarrassment or discomfort. Humans often use it when witnessing someone else in an awkward situation." A forest of tentacles, pincers, and various alien appendages shot into the air. "Yes, the distinguished Arcturian in the third row," Jake said, pointing to a shimmering cloud of gas that had coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape. Fascinating, the Arcturian's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Does this cringe serve a biological function? Perhaps as a warning to other humans of potential social danger?" Jake chuckled. "Not exactly. It's more of an involuntary reaction. Though I suppose you could argue it serves a social function in human culture. It's often used in our entertainment media too." Suddenly, Jake's explanation was interrupted by a loud, gurgling sound. The entire auditorium fell silent, every alien eye or sensory organ equivalent turning to stare at him. Jake felt his face flush. Of all the times for his digestive system to act up, it had to be now. He briefly considered trying to play it off, but then he remembered why he was here in the first place. Taking a deep breath, he decided to turn this potentially embarrassing moment into a teaching opportunity. "Well, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary beings of all species," he said with a self-deprecating grin, "it seems my body has decided to provide us with a live demonstration. What you just heard was what humans call a stomach growl. It's a perfectly normal bodily function, usually indicating hunger or digestive activity." The audience leaned forward, utterly captivated. Jake could practically see the questions forming in their minds. "Now, I know what you're all thinking," he continued, his confidence growing. "No, this is not a prelude to a gaseous emission. At least I sincerely hope not." This elicited a wave of alien laughter, or what passed for laughter among species that communicated through bioluminescence or interpretive dance. "You see, Jake explained, warming to his subject. Human bodies are constantly at work, even when we're not aware of it. Our digestive systems, in particular, are always processing, always moving. Sometimes, this movement creates sounds. It's completely involuntary and, I assure you, entirely harmless. A Betelgeuse in the front row raised a spindly limb. But surely it chittered excitedly. Such sounds must serve some evolutionary purpose. Perhaps as a warning to predators or a mating call. Jake couldn't help but laugh. I'm afraid not. Although, now that you mention it, I suppose a loud enough stomach growl might scare off a timid predator. As for mating calls, well, let's just say that in human culture, loud digestive noises are generally not considered attractive. This statement was met with a chorus of confused murmurs. Jake could almost hear the gears turning in the aliens' minds as they tried to reconcile this information with their understanding of human biology. But human Jake, a melodious voice called out from the back of the auditorium. Jake recognized it as belonging to a Syrian, a species known for their musical form of communication. If these sounds serve no biological function, why have they not been eliminated through evolution? Jake paused, considering the question. That's an excellent point, he said. I suppose the simple answer is that they're a side effect of our digestive process. They don't harm us, so there's no evolutionary pressure to get rid of them. Plus, they can be useful in letting us know when we're hungry. He grinned mischievously. Of course, some humans have turned these sounds into an art form of sorts. There are even competitions for who can produce the loudest or most musical stomach growl. It's not exactly a mainstream sport, but it exists. This revelation was met with a mixture of fascination and horror from the alien audience. Jake could see several of them furiously taking notes, no doubt already planning research papers on the peculiarities of human digestive symphonies. As the symposium drew to a close, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. Yes, he'd had to field more questions about human gas than he'd ever thought possible in one lifetime. But he'd also managed to share some genuine insights into human culture and biology. The aftermath of the symposium was interesting, to say the least. Jake found himself bombarded with invitations to speak at various alien cultural events. He was asked to judge a Glorpian human impersonation contest, which mainly consisted of the eye-fringed aliens making increasingly ridiculous noises and claiming they were authentic human digestive sounds. But perhaps the most surprising outcome was the sudden popularity of human cuisine in the academy cafeteria. Alien students, eager to experience the full range of human culture, began demanding Earth foods. The cafeteria staff, most of whom had never seen a human before Jake arrived, did their best to oblige. The results were mixed. What is this supposed to be? Jake asked one day, staring dubiously at the gelatinous mass on his tray. The cafeteria attendant, a cheerful Venusian, burbled happily. It's your Earth delicacy, the one you call pizza. We've recreated it using our most advanced food synthesizers. Jake poked at the wobbling substance with his fork. It jiggled ominously. I appreciate the effort, he said diplomatically, but I'm not sure this quite captures the essence of pizza. The Venusian's gelatinous form quivered with disappointment. Oh dear, perhaps we misunderstood the concept. We thought pizza was a type of self-contained nutrient gel. Jake couldn't help but laugh. Not quite. But hey, points for creativity. Tell you what, how about I help you guys set up a real human cooking class? I'm no chef, but I think I can at least show you the basics. And so, Jake found himself adding culinary instructor to his ever-growing list of roles at the Galactic Academy. His cooking classes quickly became the hottest ticket on campus, with aliens of all species clamoring to learn the mysteries of human cuisine. There were, of course, some challenges. Teaching beings with vastly different sensory organs about human concepts of taste and smell was interesting. And then there was the memorable incident when a well-meaning Jupiterian, confused by Jake's instructions to beat the eggs, ended up declaring war on the Academy's entire stock of poultry products. But despite the occasional culinary catastrophe, Jake found himself enjoying his new role. There was something deeply satisfying about sharing his culture through food, about seeing the look of delight on an alien face or tentacles or bioluminescent patches when they tasted their first successfully made Earth dish. One day, as Jake was demonstrating the fine art of flipping pancakes to a group of eagerly watching aliens, he had a sudden realization. Here he was, light years from Earth, teaching extraterrestrial beings how to cook human breakfast foods. If someone had told him a year ago that this would be his life, he would have laughed them out of the room. Human Jake, a timid voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked down to see a small, amoeba-like creature peering up at him with what he assumed was curiosity. "I have a question about the pancake substance." Jake smiled encouragingly. "Go ahead. What would you like to know?" The alien's gelatinous form rippled with excitement. "Well, I've been studying the chemical composition of this pancake, and I've noticed it bears a striking resemblance to certain high-energy plasma formations found in the corona of yellow dwarf stars. Is this intentional? Are pancakes a way for humans to harness stellar energy?" For a moment, Jake could only stare in bewildered silence. Then, unable to contain himself, he burst into laughter. The alien recoiled slightly, its form wobbling in confusion. "I'm sorry," Jake gasped between chuckles. "I'm not laughing at you, I promise. It's just, sometimes I forget how different our perspectives can be." He took a deep breath, composing himself. "No, pancakes aren't a way to harness stellar energy. They're just food. Delicious, comforting food." The alien seemed to deflate slightly. "Oh, how disappointing. I had hoped humans had discovered a way to consume stars." Jake patted the creature gently with his spatula. "Hey, don't be disappointed. Just because pancakes aren't stellar plasma doesn't mean they're not special. Here, let me show you something." He turned back to the griddle, where several pancakes were cooking to a perfect golden brown. With a deft flick of his wrist, he flipped one high into the air. It spun gracefully before landing back on the griddle with a satisfying sizzle. The assembled aliens gasped in awe, their various appendages waving in excitement. "You see," Jake said with a grin, "pancakes might not be stellar plasma, but they've got a magic all their own." As he continued his demonstration, Jake found himself reflecting on his journey. He'd come to the Galactic Academy hoping to learn about alien cultures, to bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the universe. He'd never imagined that he'd be doing it through fart jokes and pancake flipping. But maybe, he thought as he watched his alien students attempt to recreate his pancake flip with varying degrees of success and several near misses with the ceiling, this was exactly what interstellar diplomacy needed. Not stuffy treaties or formal negotiations, but shared laughter, shared meals, shared experiences. After all, wasn't that what it meant to be human? To find joy in the simple things, to laugh at our own absurdities, to connect with others over a shared plate of food. As Jake looked around at the chaos of the alien cooking class, batter splattering across tentacles, pancakes stuck to ceiling, laughter or alien equivalents thereof echoing through the room, he felt a surge of pride. He might not be curing interstellar diseases or negotiating peace treaties, but in his own small way, he was bringing the galaxy a little closer together, one pancake flip at a time. As the semester drew to a close, Jake found himself facing an unexpected dilemma. His time at the Galactic Academy was coming to an end, and he was due to return to Earth. But the thought of leaving behind the weird and wonderful world he'd become a part of filled him with a strange sense of melancholy. On his last day, the Academy threw him a farewell party. The Great Hall was decked out in what the aliens believed to be traditional human party decorations, a mishmash of birthday streamers, Christmas lights, and what looked suspiciously like Halloween cobwebs. A banner hung crookedly across the entrance, proudly proclaiming "Farewell, Human Jake, our gastrointestinal guru." Jake couldn't help but laugh as he entered the hall. "You guys really shouldn't have," he said, grinning at the assembled aliens. "No, really you shouldn't have. Who told you humans decorate with cobwebs?" A sheepish-looking Martian raised a tentacle. "Was that not correct?" The Earth documentary The Adams Family suggested it was a common human practice. Before Jake could respond, he was mobbed by a crowd of alien well-wishers. They pressed gifts into his hands, everything from a bottle of what he hoped was wine, and not some kind of industrial solvent, to a sculpture that pulsed ominously and which he was pretty sure was actually alive. As the party wound down, Professor Zlorbax approached Jake, all 7 of his eye stalks misty with what Jake assumed were tears. "Human Jake," the professor burbled, "I just wanted to say, your presence here has been most illuminating. Thanks to you, we've made great strides in human-xeno relations. Why, I've even started work on a new textbook understanding humanity from flatulence to friendship." Jake winced slightly at the title but managed to smile. "Thanks, Professor. I'm glad I could help. Though maybe consider a different title for the book. Just a thought." As Jake prepared to board the transport that would take him back to Earth, he found himself surrounded by his alien friends. The Venusian cafeteria worker presented him with a farewell gift, a gelatinous mass that was apparently their final attempt at recreating pizza. "We'll keep practicing it," burbled cheerfully. The Volnarian he'd taught to high-five approached, its tendrils waving excitedly. "Human Jake, I have mastered the art of the high-five." Observed proceeded to slap its tendrils against every nearby surface, including several bewildered bystanders. Jake laughed, feeling a lump form in his throat. "You guys, you've all been amazing. I came here to learn about alien cultures, but you've taught me so much more than that. You've shown me that no matter how different we might seem on the surface, there's always a way to connect, to understand each other. Even if it's through something as silly as a fart or a pancake flip." As the transport's engines hummed to life, Jake took one last look at the assembled aliens. "Remember," he called out, unable to resist one final joke, "if you ever visit Earth, please don't try to greet humans by farting at them. Trust me on this one." With a chorus of alien laughter and a few confused looks from species that communicated primarily through scent, Jake boarded the transport. As it lifted off, carrying him back towards Earth, he couldn't help but smile. He'd come to the Galactic Academy as a student, but he was leaving as a teacher, a friend, and perhaps even a minor intergalactic celebrity. Not bad for a guy who'd started his alien adventure with an ill-timed fart. As the Academy faded from view, replaced by the vast expanse of space, Jake settled back in his seat. He had a feeling this wasn't the end of his intergalactic adventures. After all, someone had to make sure Professor Zlorbax didn't publish that unfortunately titled textbook. And who knows? Maybe next time he visited, the cafeteria would finally have mastered the art of pizza making. A guy could dream, right? With a contented sigh, Jake closed his eyes, ready for whatever the universe had in store for him next. One thing was for sure: life would never be boring again. Not when you're the human known across the galaxy as the gastrointestinal guru.